Our session today will be a bit on the philosophical side. So, so last week we were beginning the story. We were going into the story, understanding the Bible, understanding the structure of the Bible, understanding how to study the Bible. And for those who are able to join us during Vespers, which was not a mandatory session, but I think it's still helpful when you're looking at the curriculum. For those who are not able to join us, we looked at principles of studying the Bible, essentially, how to get God in His Word. And today I want us to step back a bit. Yeah, stand where someone who is not probably a believer or someone who is studying with questions of faith stands. And when he's standing there, he beholds the marketplace of religion and philosophy, right? Of religious propositions and philosophical offers. And he sees all these things being peddled by different sellers, right? Some prophets, some imams, some rabbis, some wherever, right? Everyone is peddling their faith system, their thought system, their philosophical worldview. And everyone believes that theirs is correct. And you've just arrived there as an advisor. And your task is simple. Advise them on the right way to view life. Right? How do you do it? How do we do it? So today I want us to step back a bit and start building our faith philosophically from the foundation, from the ground up. To start establishing even the obvious things. And as we go by, I hope that by the end of this session, one thing will be very clear to us, that Christianity is not only revealed and inspired, but it is logical, defensible, and true. That it makes sense, it can be defended, and it is true. And not only that, but it is the best and simplest way to understand and explain the universe. Right? I hope our goal for today is clear. Right? I'm actually I can actually navigate around and see the class. Yeah. So, is our objective for today clear? What you're hoping to do today? Amazing. Now, when you look around yourself, what you see things, right? You can call everywhere you see things. You see cars, houses, lands, depending on where you live. For some people, they look outside the window, they see expressway, some see GTC, some see a police station, some see someone being robbed. I mean, we see things around us, right? And if you can summarize the things we see, you can probably say what you see around us is the world, is the universe, right? At an even larger scale. Now, when we talk about the universe all around us, what exactly are we talking about? So please follow with me, right? This might be a bit heavy on the philosophical side, but track with me. Track with me. I checked out a website called Universe Today. And this was its definition of the universe. So remember, the universe is everything around us. We are part of the universe. We are in the universe. You are in the universe. Your parents are in the universe. But not only we, you, and our parents and our friends, but also our fights, our cultures, our fears, our philosophies, all those are in the universe. All those are in this place called the universe. And so, Universe Today, trying to understand trying to explain what it has understood. This is a very scientific website, a very scientific source. Trying to explain what the entirety of the universe is, this is how it defines the universe. It says the sum total of all existence. I think I should have put this definition on the slide, right? So I'll read today to explore the fundamental perspectives on reality and belief. So this is how the universe today defines the universe. It says the sum total of all existence, the entirety of time, space, matter, and energy. Time, space, matter, and energy. I know last week Calvin handled the discussion of story and how time is simply the canvas upon which life is lived. Right? We live life through time. And the sum total of life is what we call story, because we're living through a story. Now, these guys are saying that the sum total of everything that exists is either time, it is space, it is matter, or it is energy. And if you're a bit scientifically aligned, a bit scientifically inclined, that's what I wanted. If you're a bit scientifically inclined, you probably have heard of E is equals to mc squared, where E is equals to energy and m is equals to mass. So that energy and mass are actually interrelated things. So matter and energy are different states of the same thing. But anyway, ignore that. The thing is, according to this scientific website, they said everything that exists is either time, space, or matter stroke energy. But then that begs the question. Don't worry, guys, with time we will connect this with scripture. That begs the question, is that really the sum total of all existence? So just to track if you've understood what I've done so far, I've just said a single definition. But just to track if you've understood what I've covered so far. If you agree with that definition, react to the thumbs up. If you agree with that definition, the sum total of all existence, right? All existence basically means everything in existence. The sum total of all existence is either time, space, matter, or energy. If you think that that's the correct definition, react to the thumbs up. Okay. Flynn Michelle say that that's a very correct definition. It can encompass a good number of people. Beverly Amos. If you do not agree with that definition, thumbs up. If you think that definition is not correct, it misses out some things. Okay, I'm saying Peter, Michael, Ludi, and the So let me pick a few people who have rejected this definition, who have arrogantly decided to stand against the edifice of great scientists and offer their opinion. Precious, what do you think this definition leaves out? I'm assuming my earphone works, so it's probably a mic.
Yeah, it was my mic. Okay. Hi everyone.
Hey.
Precious. I was just saying that you're going to pick on me, but anyways, I think I disagree. I disagree with it because it's okay. It's simplistic. It reduces it to what? Okay, this sounds very, I don't know, but it reduces it to the things we know. You know, it's very scientific. It excludes things that are not scientifically like provable. Yeah.
Like?
Do I have an example that is fitable in one word? I don't.
Maybe I can because I saw Michael's hand. Michael, you probably want to give an example. What do you think this definition excludes? Thanks, Precious. Really good. I know the word you're looking for, and I think I'll give you that word.
Hi again. Yeah, I agree with Precious. It's a bit, I find it also a bit too simple because life in itself is not what you see, touch, and hear per se. It leaves out things like purpose, the dignity of man. I don't know, because the entirety of the universe is not just time, space, matter, or energy. Because in a way, the way I think about it, the universe kind of, or everything that we made is kind of like for our benefits. So it leaves out, I don't know, Yeah. So
Okay.
I think it
I
involves,
hear
yeah.
you. Purpose, something like purpose. Debbie, what one thing that you think this definition leaves out?
Hi everyone. I think both Precious and the other guy have said it. What I thought. It leaves out purpose. Like the universe is just about those things. It's also is some bigger thing about it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, man. Purpose. I think most of us are looking for purpose. Yeah, and I really appreciate this. And I think what Precious was saying is that the universe is not simply the material universe, right? It's not simply the natural universe. There is the supernatural. Not just the material, there is the spiritual. Not just the physical, there is the metaphysical, right? And that's the thing. While this explains, while this explains the material reality, is that really all that encompasses reality, right? When it leaves out thoughts, feelings, emotions, you talk about purpose, values, ideas, even information. Where do you put information in all this, right? It leaves out, are these also primarily material? Are we primarily material? Are you simply matter, carrying energy, occupying space, and walking through time? Or is there more to you than just atoms and molecules? Right? And this is the conflict between science and religion often. It's not so much which one is true, it is a birth beautiful. Right? Like, it's not so much which one is true, but which one is fundamental. Is our origin material or is our origin spiritual? Why are we here? Is there an innate purpose to all of these things? Or are we just walking through purposeless existence, like Big Bang, for instance, would propose? Is there something like right and wrong? And why? Does it break a scientific law? So that's why it's wrong. Where do we go when we die? Right? Atheists might say just go to the dust. Right? And these are the questions that defines our worldview: origin, meaning, morality, destiny. And you can ask the same for the universe itself. Is the origin of the universe purely material? Did the universe come from another universe? And where did that universe come from? If it's matter from matter, right? Meaning, why does the whole universe exist? What laws govern the universe itself? What moral laws? And will this world one day end? So, how we address these questions shape this thing that we call a worldview. Right? A worldview. A worldview is essentially our perspectives on reality and belief. And that's what we'll be looking at today. Right? So, why is a worldview important? Because how you view the world is how you understand reality, and it shapes how you understand the purpose for your existence and the values you should live by. So that a worldview is the lens through which you interpret existence. Is it purely material? Is it spiritual? Is there a God who rules this universe? What kind of God is he? Is he loving? Is he primarily power? Does he care? Is he personal? Right? Now, once upon a time, some guys sat down, a group of scholars. They sat down and they decided they want to compile a volume of the greatest books that have impacted the Western world, Europe, the Americas, basically the developed world. So they look for the greatest books that have shaped how we view things. And these books were categorized according to subjects. There were books all the way from Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, 2,000 years ago. Books on the wars of Rome. books on science, books on flowers, like it was as random as it can get. Any book that they feel has shaped how people think, how people feel, has shaped our education system, has shaped democracy, was put there. Went to 60 volumes. And of course, they're divided by subjects. And one of the subject was God. And God was just listed there as one of many other subjects: science, psychology, philosophy, and then there was God. But the interesting thing was, this section on God was the biggest section in this compilation of books. So one day, the editor called Mortimer Adler was asked, why do you think the section on God was the biggest? Why do you think it was the biggest? Why do you think that most of the books that have shaped the Western world have been books about God, and more than books about democracy, more than books about politics, more than books about romance, though those abound, especially from the 18th century, more than books about battles and more than books about technology and AI, books about God are the most. And he said, it's because there is no other question whose answer has more impact than the question of God. You go wrong on nuclear fusion versus nuclear fission, nobody cares. Right? You go wrong on politics, okay, we just get a dictator here and there, but you go wrong on the question of who or what God is, and you can bomb, you can cause 9/11, right? You can cause the abductions of Christians that is happening in Nigeria. You can cause what history saw during the Spanish Inquisitions of the 16th century. You go wrong on the question of God, it shapes how you view the world. Right? And why is the question of God very important? Let's take, for instance, the conflict between religion and science on the question of origin. Right? If you believe that God exists, then you believe that God is the cause of your existence, creation, which will be our next trick. And if God is the one who caused you to exist, and you believe that God is an intelligible, moral being, then you also believe that this God who caused you to exist has a reason why he caused Mukulima Asheri to exist. So that your life has an essential meaning and purpose that is not dependent on your quality, but on your originator. Ukue mbaya, ukue mzuri, there's a reason why you are brought into existence, whether you fulfill it or not. Right? A phone can have a 48 megapixel camera. You give it to a bad cameraman, it will take bad photos, but it's not a reflection of its purpose. It was created to take good photos. So, why didn't it exist? Purpose. And if God exists, then he defines how we should live. That is morality, laws of morality, right and wrong. And if God is above and beyond this universe, then it means when you die, that's not the end of all things. Because this God exists in a spiritual realm. That means there's another realm. And when you die, he is the one who decides right and wrong. So even when justice is not served in this existence, he still has time to serve that justice. But let's say God does not exist, as let's say evolution might propose. If God does not exist, then what are we? There was no mind behind our existence. We existed not as a consequence of purpose, but as a consequence of random chance. Some continents smashed somewhere, spewed out hydrogen and helium, and over a million years, they eventually formed Peter ones. I mean, literally, you are the result of an accident. Right? And because it's the result of an accident, then there is no meaning and purpose for your existence. If you live and die without ever doing anything, you've not failed to fulfill anyone's purpose. See? When there is no destination, everywhere is destination. And since this world is a product of chance, no one can tell you how you ought to live. Right? Meaning and morality is not determined by anyone above us. We are the ones who define for ourselves because we just landed here. by chance. So we have to figure out how we live life. So we sit down, 3, 4, 10 people, one nation. We decide, what do we think right and wrong should be? Okay, let's say a man should marry a woman. And let's say we can actually change and say, no, it's. So there is no real morality. There's no real right and wrong. We just decide what works for us at that time, and that becomes right and wrong at that time. Either you decide or you as a society decide. And ultimately, when you die, you go back to the dust. If you are wronged in this universe and you never got a chance to get back, or whoever wronged you, oops, too bad for you. You lost your chance. And so you see how the question of God really shapes how we view the world. But it goes beyond simply the question of God. It is a question of which God? How do you even understand this idea of God? Right? Because yes, God exists, so there's someone who runs this universe. But if you feel that God is not a good guy, it's still not a good thing. I love this analogy that Tigis usually uses. He says, imagine you find yourself in a house alone. Maybe you've been left home alone by your parents. And so at 9, 10, you decided to go to sleep. Then, when you're in the bedroom, you hear some motion in the lounge, in the living room. And so you realize, nilikuwa kwa hii nyumba peke yangu, so there should be no one else in the house. So you decide to wake up slowly and start walking gently towards the living room to see who else is there. But before you get to the living room, you see that the light is on in the living room. And that light has cast a shadow of a person against the wall. So, but you can just see a shadow of them. And when you look at the shadow, you see something. You see that this shadow is the shadow of someone mwenye miraba minne na misuli tinginya. Yeah? It's someone who is huge. Right? Immediately, the first thing you hope is, clearly I can't fight this guy. We're in this house alone. I hope he's a nice guy. Right? That's your prayer. It's just like, I hope it's some uncle I've never known about and who just came home and knocked him, right? You hope he's a nice guy. That's exactly the story of our universe. If God exists, then we are stuck in this universe with an omnipotent being. And if he's not a nice guy, we are cooked. Unakosea kidogo, ndio huyo rusho kwa moto, right? So, which kind of God? Now, so once again, we are standing at the marketplace of religions, looking at all these things on offer, because we're just starting. This is our module 1, pre-creation. And we want to walk this journey until you arrive at the decision of which God we worship. And what you see is a very busy market, very busy market. Everyone has something on offer. And it feels like, how do you shop? But do you know that? Do you know that this is besides the point. In psychology, there's something called analysis paralysis. Yeah? Analysis paralysis is when you analyze too much until you become paralyzed to make a decision. You have too many varied options that it's impossible to make decision. Right? And in philosophy, we talk about something called the paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is we assume that if you're given more room to choose, you'd be happier. But more often than not, we're happier when you have less room to choose. If you have time, I would go deeper into that, but that's not the point today. So the thing is, in supermarkets, they usually limit the number of brands. So let's say you go to a toiletries shelf, let's say tissue paper. They will probably have 6, 7, but they'll have a limit. For the reason that ukiingia kwa super and unaona 40 packets of tissue and all of them are different brands, you will not shop. You'll be like, okay, hii ni soft kuliko hii ni 2-ply, this one has bigger plies, this one is scented, this one is, you're like, okay, I can't even choose. You'll be overwhelmed by choice. And sometimes you feel like that when you come to religion. Like you have You have so many religions, first of all. Then under each religion, there are so many denominations. Then even go to a denomination, and even within the denomination itself, people are so varied. Sometimes they feel like they're in different denominations, right? You attend church in some campus somewhere, then you attend a home church somewhere, and you cannot believe that those two guys are in the same faith. So where do you begin when you're having this marketplace of faith and you have all these options on offer? You try and start categorizing the options on offer so that you can easily eliminate a category, because if you eliminate a category, then, right? So, last month we had traveled to South Africa, and I saw something there which I had never seen all my life. Like, it was so strange to think that I had always imagined that life exists a certain way. And this is the thing, nothing so serious. We went to SA, we bought tissue paper, and we found that their tissue papers are single ply. I don't know if you guys know what a ply is. Like, normally tissue paper is two ply. I had never imagined that actually tissue paper exists that is not two ply. Like, it was single ply. What? So you have to know what you normally use. Like, I even just carried one to Kenya just for memory that I have actually met single ply tissue. Right? So when you're shopping for tissue and you go to such a supermarket, instead of going through 40 brands, yeah, yeah, you just be like, I'll not pick any tissue that is single ply. That's a whole category. You eliminate 20 options. So how can you group this idea of God? These are what we call God views. Views are concerning God. Now, we'll divide, there are three fundamental views on God. Who thinks that they can guess the three fundamental views on God? Who wants to try? In religious circles, we always say this thing to motivate people. There is no wrong answer. Okay, wrong answers exist, but there is no wrong answer. You can try, man. You can try. Yes. Anyway, huh? Anyone want to try? Sure. Okay, someone has unmuted, and then Ashir. Who had unmuted? Aisha. Go ahead.
I do not have three, but I have two.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a God who created us and is involved with our affairs, that kind of view.
Mm-hmm.
Then the view would be a God who created us and forgot all about us and just left us alone to figure out our stuff and do whatever we like. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. See, the good thing with this question is, since I've not said how you should categorize it, actually answers me because there are so many views on God. That's beautiful. Actually, the first one is called deism, the God who walked away and will come back on judgment day to judge us, and then the God is involved. But these are the three views I want to discuss about. View number one is the view that there is no God. Yeah, I know it was that's this question that looks like it's a difficult question. You're like, oh yeah. Yes, baby. I know you not guess that. Now you know, right? So view number one is that there is no God. Yeah? What is the word that usually used for that view?
Atheist.
Thank you. Atheism, right? There is no God. View number two is that there is a God who exists, and this God is not nature. He's distinct from nature. Because we see all around us, we see nature. Anyone who believes that nature does not exist, it's a bigger problem, right? So we see nature all around us. But the people believe that all we have is nature, there's no God. Two people believe that God exists, but he is independent of nature. He's separate from nature. He is not nature itself, right? That is called theism. So there is atheism, then there is theism, theism. Then belief number three is that there is God, but this God is synonymous with nature. He is part of nature. That God is all and all is God. Okay? So there is no God, there is all is God, there is all and God. And God besides everything. So the third one is called pantheism. So theos meaning God, pan meaning all, pantheism, all is God. There's a variation of pantheism which says God is not everything, but God is in everything. So if you kula mkate, umekula Mungu. If you drink tea, you have drunk God. If you chop down a tree, you chop down God. Like God is in anything, that God is not anything. That's called panentheism, but it's more or less the same thing. Right? So a theist is someone who believes in a personal God, like a God who exists as an entity separate from nature. And so this personal God created the universe, but is not part of the universe. Right? So you can imagine if you use the illustration of a painter, this is someone who believes that there's a painting hanging on the wall, and there was a painter outside the painting who painted the painting. So God is the painter, all that exists is the painting. Right? So, example of a religion that is theistic, a theistic religion. Anyone? Someone has admitted, but you have not heard what they have said.
Christianity.
Christianity, yeah, thank you. Christianity. Another one. Amos, wewe yako ni chat box. Chat. Type there an answer. So Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all those are theistic religions. They believe in a God who exists, and this God is a personal being separate from the universe. Pantheists, someone who believes in an impersonal God that literally is the universe. So taking our analogy again, painting and painting. A pantheist believes that there's a painting hanging on the wall, but God is that painting. Right? So God is everything that exists. Ooh, my laptop must go off. Let me just get a charger as I'm talking. So I hope you can still hear me. So that means for a pantheist, they believe that God is everything that exists, right? God is when you look at the grass, that is God. When you look at the sky, that is God. When you look at rocks, that is God. When you look at a book, God is God. When you look at you, you are God. And that's the whole goal of wrong understandings of God. It always ends up cycling back to you are God. If I was to do this as a sermon and not as a lesson, I'd have titled it the God delusion. I think that's a good word. Yeah. You are God. So in pantheism, everything manifests the presence of God. Nature and God are identical. Identical. Some examples of pantheistic religions is anyone who knows one religion that believes this, that everything that exists is God. Yes, I've seen a hand. Peter?
Hinduism.
Yes. Many variations of Hinduism believes they are pantheistic. For those who have studied a bit of Adventist history, you know that there's a time when pantheism even came into the history of Adventism, but it's because a good number of the guys who started it had gone to study in India. Some forms of Buddhism. Buddhism was actually started out of Hinduism, by the way. Buddha was a Hindu. And then many forms of New Age spirituality. Right? You are God kind of faith, right? May the force be with you, Star Wars, right? May the force be with you. New Age spirituality. Maybe just as a random thought, when we say that the Holy Spirit dwells in us, is that a form of pantheism? Let's not go into that, but that's a question which some people struggle with. But if you go into that, it might be a long debate. Right? So what do we exactly mean when we say that God dwells in us? Is it in the way that a Hindu would say God dwells in a tree? or is it different? If you have time at the end of the class, I'll probably open that for guys to discuss. And an atheist, of course, is someone who does not believe in any type of God, right? So you come to the wall, you find a painting, they believe that a painting exists, but that painting has always existed and no one painted it. Yeah, Jisakunga, ancient Egyptian religions as examples of pantheism. Yes. Sharon, I'm seeing your hand up and I suspect it's a question. Is that the case? Sharon?
You got it. But
Yes,
just a
please proceed.
clarification, does the Rastafarian community fall under pantheism?
Good question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, good question. Rastafarians are actually not pantheistic. Rastafarian at best is a fringe variation of Christianity. Um, Rastafarian from the word Rastafari, from Rastafari Makonnen, the AKA of Haile Selassie, simply believe that Haile Selassie was the Messiah incarnate. So the views of God is actually that God exists. They largely believe in the God of the Bible. You sit down with them, you'll hear that they quote a lot about Isaiah. So they usually have a lot of Zionism in their views, a lot of Judaism also in their views. So they believe in a personal God who exists. They just not believe a lot in Testament the way normal Christians actually believe in the idea of Christ and the idea of God, but they believe in a personal God. Yeah, but they still have a lot of these visions of Zion and even if you hear their songs, there'll be a lot of Zion in their music and the likes. The Lion of Judah metaphor. So they have a lot of the glorified view of Judaism that Judaism had that made them to actually reject Christ when Christ came the first time. Yeah, awesome. So if you want to remember the three, theism, God made all, pantheism, God is all, atheism, no God at all. Right? So theism, painter and painting, pantheism, painter in painting, atheism, no painter, just painting. Right? So in theism, God is the hand holding up the world. In pantheism, God is the hand in the world. In atheism, there is nothing but the world. Right? So I think we've covered this. Theism, God as a creator, distinct from creation, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Pantheism, God is the universe itself. Hinduism, some forms of Buddhism, New Age spirituality, and then atheism. The universe is a result of natural processes without a creator. So you realize that by just categorizing religious worldviews into three, we already delete a significant chunk when we choose that this particular line of belief is what makes more sense. So when you believe that God exists, you already eliminate all forms of belief that are atheistic and all forms of belief that are pantheistic. But I want us to go even further. And understand this idea of God. So religions exist. And religions are, someone said that theology is, what's theology? And it was a quote, it was not entirely accurate, but this quote, the quote said, religion is man trying to reach God. Christianity is God trying to reach man. But essentially, the idea is that religions are essentially humanity's attempt to understand life by positing the idea of God. And usually, religions discuss, let's say, 4 subjects that I want us to look at. These are the 4 subjects that religions generally discuss. I did them as D's just for ease of remembrance. The 4 D's of religion. D number 1 is deity. What do you believe about God? Deity. What do you believe about God? Right? And we've looked at already 3 views about God. God does not exist, atheism. God exists as the universe, pantheism, and God exists independent of the universe, theism. Two, what do you believe about destruction and death? Right? Why does pain exist? Why does suffering exist? Right? So this is a question that humanity generally asks without going to school. You just find yourself asking the question, hey, you God man exists Akohaje, man. How is this God like? Oh, but I heard that we had one person who is not Kenyan, and I'll do my best to not be throwing in Swahili. But these are the guys who have joined today, people who understand Swahili. Two is, why is there pain? Why is there suffering? Three is the question of desire. Why do you experience desire? Right? Why do you fall in love? Why do you miss someone? Right? Why do you experience these things by the way? Right? And then deliverance. Looking all around us and seeing all the pain and suffering. How shall we be delivered from this existence that appears to be less than ideal? So I want us to walk through different religions, right? Different religions, and how they try to answer these four questions. So I will fly over them and just briefly touch on things here and there, and then you guys can go and look at them further. So you cannot, of course, consider all religions, but I look at the 5 major world religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, New Age spirituality. Judaism, not so much because it's usually just half Christianity. So let's go one by one. So the main point of today's session is for us to understand the general view of God in the world. So that as we go deeper and deeper into our faith, but at least also, they say in life you go a bit broad and a bit deep, right? And a lot deep, a bit broad and a lot deep. So you cover ground on the sides to understand what people believe about God. Then when we now start understanding our beliefs, one, we realize we try to ground ourselves in our own faith, but two, we also become cognizant of what other people in the world believe. So, step number one, Hinduism. What do Hindus believe? Most Hindus worship one being of ultimate oneness. They worship one ultimate oneness, which they call the Brahman. But then this ultimate oneness is in all of us. Right? So that's why you see it has a lot of idols. It's not because they're idol worshippers, because for them they believe that God is in the idols. So they put an idol there. It's not that the idols are different, because for them they believe, you see, for those who have watched Star Wars, this is a good way to explain it. When you hear the force be with you, the force is in somewhere in the universe. The force is just, I have a colleague who is Japanese, and discussing the idea of God, and he was born in a Buddhist family. Buddhist is a non-theistic religion. Buddhism does not have God, and then he eventually went into science, and he just became a naturalist. Does not believe in the idea of religion and spirituality at all. So I asked him, what do you think runs the world? And he says, I think there is a force in nature that governs the universe. Right? And he says this force is what some people call karma. Right? So it's a force that seeks to balance things out. So that's why karma exists, to balance things out. So it's a force of balance. It's interesting that you don't believe in God, but still believe in a force that punishes bad people, right? So Hinduism believes in this thing called the force that is in all things. And that's why, for instance, sometimes hear people talk about Hindus worshiping cows. It's because they believe that in that cow there is a revelation of divinity. In River Ganges in India, there is divinity. So God is in all those. So there's one oneness, which is now the God and is in all things. Why do people go through pain, suffering, destruction, and ultimately death? In Hinduism, it's because you did something in your past life, you're paying for it in your current life, right? Because it's a religion that believes in reincarnation. So, of course, and that explains how you should get deliverance, right? Just don't come. And of course, in reincarnation, you can come back as different things. So if you become Team Fist in this universe, you've decided in this lifetime, you've decided how you want to come back in the next. You're Team Nyox, you decided how you want to come back in the next. Right? So actions in a previous life. How do we explain desire? And so I think that clarifies a bit. How do we explain desire? In Hinduism, the goal is to become free from the law of karma, right? And so the greatest desire is to be freed from continuous reincarnations. Because in Hinduism, if you live life pure enough, you'll be freed from reincarnations. And how do you get deliverance from all these things? You have three ways of being delivered from this cycle of karma. One is to be lovingly devoted to one of the Hindu deities. You just give yourself fully to one of the Hindu deities. You go to the temple as often as you can, you give gifts and alms and all of these things. Two is meditation. Right? And you've seen a lot of that, I think. Meditation. So you meditate that you might realize that everything is an illusion. When you get there, then you'll have freed yourself. And that's how they understand desire. For them, all desire is an illusion. Right? That love you feel, that missing you feel, that hatred you feel, it's all an illusion. And the goal is to free yourself from this illusion. So that you're not shackled or hindered by your desire for love, for instance. Three, you're freed by being dedicated to various religious ceremonies and rites. So you realize that there is a lot of discipline involved for you to get freedom. We go to the next one, New Age spirituality. You probably heard a lot about New Age spirituality. It's usually marketed a lot by motivational speakers. This your God kind of view of things. You're in control of all things. You're in control of your decisions. You'll believe that thing until that day when you turn up for 1 year with very good papers and you realize you're not interested. But anyway, there's a lot of that in motivational speaking. It all stems from New Age spirituality, right? So it promotes the development of one's own power, divinity. So then when New Age spiritualists refer to deity, they're usually not talking about a transcendent personal being created in the universe. It's more of a higher consciousness of yourself, right? You become more God by getting in touch with your mind. So what do they believe about deity? You are God. What do they believe about death and destruction? It's all an illusion. It's all in the mind. You can free yourself from all these things. And that's a lot. It's very common in many of these pantheistic religions. Because if God is everything, then all the bad things are simply an illusion. So the desire is to create your own reality, where you decide for yourself whether you want to feel love or hate, all those things. And how do you get delivered? So usually New Age spirituality has a lot of negative, has a lot of Eastern mysticism, and they use things such as hypnotism and other psychic techniques to free yourself. So that's New Age spirituality. The next religion is Buddhism. It's very common in the East, Chinese, Japanese, the Koreans. You've probably seen this image a lot in movies. That is Buddha. Buddhism has no god in the religion. It's an atheistic religion, so they don't worship any gods or god. The Buddha, a man called Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, he never claimed to be God or to be divine, but he's viewed by Buddhism as someone who attained, you know how he said about Hinduism? Hinduism was about being freed from desire. And you will be freed from desire by attaining to spiritual enlightenment, right? And this whole conflict between intelligence and emotions is at the center of Hinduism. So Buddha was a Hindu, and Buddhists believe that Buddha arrived at that level of spiritual enlightenment where he was freed from the continuous cycle of life and death. So Buddhism believes that Buddha never died. So again, it's a reincarnation religion. They believe that you keep on coming back through rebirths, and these rebirths involve suffering, and the goal is to end suffering. And they believe that what causes you to be reborn is your cravings, your desires, your delusions, your love, your emotions. And so the goal of Buddhism is to free yourself completely from this. I remember this time one Christian apologist called Rabbi Zacharias recounted a story about this time he met a certain Buddhist leader who was a woman. And the Buddhist leader had 2 children, I think 2 or 3 children, And in their conversations, they are discussing about the goal for life. And of course, the Buddhist was saying the goal for life is to free yourself completely of all desire. And she was a leader. And so, Ravi asked her if she has freed herself from all this desire. And she was like, yeah, I am a true Buddhist. I have freed myself from all of this desire that I may be freed from incarnation. And they had a back and forth about how desire is important. You can imagine arguing with someone why love is important, right? And then eventually, when the discussion was over and the lights were out and the curtains were down, and just having a chat, And Ravi brought up the conversation of children, and Ravi talks about his children, how he's missing them in the States and all those things. And the lady says, she's also missing like she only sees the kids once a week because they're in a certain where do these guys stay? Convent, something like that. Yeah, and she wishes she could see them more often. And Ravi just asked her, do you wish to be freed from that desire as well? Right? So it's sometimes counterintuitive to our own desires. And so, of course, deliverance is through personal restraint, restraining yourself, your emotions, your desires, fasting, and a very dedicated meditation. Right? They call it until you reach nirvana, what they call the blowing out of the flame of desire. You've read that nirvana. You have no desire for money, no desire for wealth, no desire for marriage, no desire for children. You're free from all desire. And then Islam, I think we'll go first on this. Islam believes in a personal being, but you know what Asheri was saying, he's a transcendental being. He is impassible. The word in English is impassible. He's not touched with the emotions. He doesn't experience emotions really. He's unknowable. And that's why for instance, Islam does not call God Father, because you cannot relate to God with anything in this existence. In Islam, what causes pain, death, and suffering? It's God. God is in charge of everything, right? But then they don't have this great controversy between God and Satan. What's the ultimate desire in Islam? To enter paradise. That's the ultimate desire in Islam, to enter into paradise. How do you get there? Faithfulness to the 5 pillars of Islam. Repeating a creed about, believe in one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. 2, doing 5 prayers a day. 3, giving alms and offerings. That's helping the needy and support the church. 4, Ramadan, right? 1 month each year, you fast from food, drinking, sex, and smoking from sunrise to sunset. And 5, pilgrimage to Mecca for all who can, right? A Hajj. And at death, based on one's faithfulness to these duties, a Muslim hopes to enter paradise. If not, they'll be eternally punished in hell. I want you to notice something about these religions so far. While they all have different views of God, their views of God have shaped what they believe about the reason why pain and suffering exist. And they all have different desires. But ultimately, one thing that unites all of them is that the way to be delivered from this kind of existence of pain and suffering is through doing something and doing it very diligently. It's the 5 pillars of Islam, or it is meditation in Buddhism to arrive to nirvana, or it is personal, or it is devotion to one of the gods, as it is in Hinduism, or it is through hypnotism, as it is in New Age spiritualism. There is something you must do. What about Islam, Christianity? Christianity believes in one God like Islam, but this God is a relational God. He's a God who can be known, he's not knowable, he's a God who is personal, and he's a God who is relatable. He's a loving God who desires a personal relationship. What is the cause of death and destruction? It is not God, but it is sin, which was brought into existence by created order. We'll look more into that in module 3, this being module 1. Our desire is to inherit eternal life, that we might live with God for forever. So you can say our greatest desire in Christianity is God himself. And finally, how do you attain to deliverance? You attain to deliverance by entering into a relationship of faith and love with God. And this relationship yields disobedience. So if you have yields obedience, sorry. So if you have obedience outside of this relationship, it is considered legalism and not the path to deliverance. So looking at this, you realize that the religions are very different, right? Hinduism has many gods. Buddhism has no God. New Age spirituality says you are God. Muslims believe in a powerful but unknowable God. Christians believe in a powerful but knowable God. Right? All religions are not the same, as much as sometimes people might say, some people might say all religions are the same. All religions are superficially similar, but fundamentally very different, right? And they differ on each of these 4 points, and particularly on how we get deliverance. So, at that point, do we have some? This felt like a lecture in comparative religion. Do we have some view of how the religions vary in the world? Right? We do, right? Some diversity in major religions. Now, if we were to let's now look at this. So this different, you might never meet a Buddhist until you die, probably, or a Hindu, I don't know. You might probably meet a Muslim, and you might feel, okay, maybe where is the interface between me and these belief systems? Now, beyond the stark contrast among the major world religions, all these belief systems can be reduced to 5 basic views of God and how that shapes our understanding of evil and suffering. And that will be the chiefest thing that we'll do now this night. So we've seen the various religions, we've seen comparatively, and I think probably by now you probably see why we would prefer Christianity over other religions, even independent of inspiration. I mean, it's a religion that presents a God who is actually relational and who is both powerful and relational outside of us. Because sometimes you see the foolishness you do and you're like, hey, I would not want God to be part of me. If this is God, then you're so messed up, right? But these major world religions can be reduced to 5. They come and coincide at 5 basic worldviews. Let me explain the 5 basic worldviews. I'll run quickly through the first 2 because we already talked about it. The first view is naturalism. That is the worldview of the atheist. The atheistic worldview is called naturalism. Naturalism is basically from the word nature. It's not a religion, it's a philosophy. It's the idea that there is no God, only natural processes. It's all atoms and molecules. Everything you see, atoms and molecules. The thoughts in your head, there is nothing unique about your thoughts. They're just electrical impacts. The emotions you feel, there is nothing unique about that. That crash you have, there is nothing unique about that. It is just a chemical reaction, right? So everything is thought. Human thoughts and human feelings are material responses to stimuli. It's either genetic, it's either nature or nurture. There is no moral or supernatural dimension to life. Everything that you say is good is not just good, it is efficient. So the things which sustain existence, those are things we call good. The things which oppose existence, those are things we call bad. Simple, right? So that's the naturalism, the atheistic world. If you're a true atheist, those are the things you must believe as an atheist. If you don't believe those things, then you're going against the fundamental principles of atheism. So, a true atheist, for instance, only believes that prisons exist for the safety of humanity, not because the prisoners are actually wrong. Because morality does not exist. It's just the actions that, one, they're not the most convenient actions, and 2, they are determined. Right? They're either determined by genetics or by the environment. It's not really a mistake. Anyway, we will not be able to go deep into that. The next one is pantheism. God in all as all. So this, I think if we discuss this, there is no personal God. God is impersonal. He's synonymous with nature. And in pantheism, the idea, and you've probably seen this, I should have put that image. I don't know if you guys know the yin and yang, right? The yin yang, I think I can draw. Right? Usually looks like a circle like this, and then it has something like this. There's a circle here, there's a circle here, and this circle is shaded with I'll take a bigger pen. This one is shaded here. And this one is shaded here. You've probably seen something like this, right? The white remains. I think I've done my best to draw with a mouse. And the idea behind this is that life exists as a balance of light and darkness, but inside every light, there is a bit of darkness, and every darkness is a bit of light. This is the idea that inside every good man, there is some bad man, and there's some badness, and inside every bad person, there is some goodness. That's the idea behind it. So, just a minute. And okay, so suffering is part of a balancing the natural cycle. Now, so these two, atheism and pantheism, is basically based on the religion. You believe in no God, you go naturalism. God is part of nature, you go with pantheism. But then if you believe that God exists, whichever version, whether it's the polytheistic God of Hinduism or monotheistic God of Islam or of Christianity, we generally have three views of now the theistic God. So 5 in total about God. And maybe you'll be able to follow this. Have you ever had an account where, say, someone has gotten into an accident and they have died, and then someone says, no worries, it was her time to die. Right? It was her time to die. Ilikuwa imefika kama siku yako ya kufika, kama siku yako, kama imefika siku yako ya kuenda, umeenda tu. Ndio. Right? So the belief that God determines, right? Or you heard people talk about in love soulmates. And whether there's someone who was when you just got born like this, someone was appointed so that you marry them. Right? If you die before your time, you have too bad. They're your soulmate. Now they just have to die single also. Right? Or the idea of fate, destiny. Something has been chosen for you, right? And this is how we sometimes think of God. And this is called deterministic theism. The idea that God determines all events. He determines everything that happens, right? Even in suffering are ordained by God according to his sovereign will. A flood happens or tsunami, it's an act of God, right? An act of God. We don't fight against God. And usually, this view is manifested when we're afraid of asking questions about God. You know, you say something like, if God exists, how could he allow this suffering on me? And people in church condemn you and they stop you from asking. It's because they believe in a deterministic God who is not meant to be questioned. He might just determine evil upon you. All right? So, what is the consequence of this? So this basically comes from the idea. It's a control word. It's the idea that God's chief characteristic is power, and his main objective is control. What he desires above all things is to control the narrative. He wants to control how the story goes. You decide. Okay, now one of the consequences of this, I think I just say in this next slide. One of the consequences of deterministic theism is that it makes people to avoid personal responsibility. You can drink alcohol, go out driving. When you die, your eulogy will say, we loved him, but God loved him more. right? We can blame fate for the deaths that are caused on the road. Right? You can eat unhealthy food and blame fate for diabetes. Now, of course, calamities happen to people independent of their free will. But it's not independent of free will. It's just independent of their free will. There's a time when it was in the news, like Victoria, the lack of death. A factory 100 kilometers away can poison a lake, leading to the death of fish consumers. But that person still exercises free will, but you always attribute it to God. And that is not to say that you should always be in the business of assigning blame and trying to find who is. Sometimes you don't even know who caused the mistake. Sometimes it was the consequence of many people doing something or the other. You know, a pedestrian was drunk, the driver was speeding, the road was done poorly, and all these things together caused death. So it may be a convergence of many different fuels and factors that it may even be a generational mistake. Right? And sometimes our intelligence cannot sort it out. But the problem is that when we come to that point where we want to sort out who is to be blamed, in deterministic theism, they choose to blame it on God. Right? I don't know if you think about it, you might see places where you sometimes are deterministic, right? Where you blame God for things that happen simply because they happen independent of your free will. Sometimes even it's because of your free will. Now, so this deterministic theism helps people to avoid responsibility and helps them to avoid the burden of guilt or pain. You're in a relationship, it ends. Instead of processing the fact that it ended and the pain that it caused, you just rather say, God willed it. It was not God's purpose. And God decided that God willed that I should come here for 3 years, then be heartbroken. Problem is that it shapes the picture of a God who is often very narcissistic and very sadistic because he just determines pain on people, right? Which is not a very good idea. The fourth view of God is now, so this God is a God who is, so the third is a God who is so addicted to control. He wants power above all things. The next God is a God who is addicted to suffering of people. And his main characteristic is anger. This is that God who is a policeman who stands and just, he's a moral police, right? He's wrathful. He requires suffering or merit to appease. Now, in extreme religions, you read the Bible and you see some of those old practices, you see people offering their children as human sacrifice. And they believe that God was delighted by this sacrifice. But in subtler forms in the modern world, we see this when you try to earn God's favor. Right? Have you ever done something so wrong, you felt you can't go to church? So you're like, let me take like a week off until God I chill, I relax, then I'll come back. That's actually how it looks like. And you say, I'll get away from holy things for a while, right? Because you feel you need to appease God enough for him to accept you back again. It's what leads to legalism. It's a merit-based worldview. That God has made heaven so difficult, you must please him to get there. Right? You are in active ministry, you're caught guilty of something, and what do? You decide to not talk about God until you do enough good things to cover your bad things. And change that we often hold ourselves under a sense of condemnation, so that something bad happens to you, you're like, hey, yeah, it's because I did that thing bad and bad thing to that person. That's why God is doing this to me. Right? And on the other hand, we feel that we earn more of God's favor when we do right things. We eat well, we dress well, we pay tax, whatever. Now you feel that God starts rewarding you. So that's appeasement theism. God must be appeased. But I hope by now you realize that both of these views are wrong. Believing that God is primarily after power and he just wants to control, or that God is primarily wrathful and he just wants to cause suffering until people become good, both of them are wrong views. What is the right view concerning God? Now, the fifth view of God is what is called benevolent theism. Now in benevolent theism, or what is called the relational worldview, God's primary attribute is love. And his main objective is that we may be voluntary reciprocators of his love. A good thing, the next session we'll be having is, I think, Love and Power, Motong by Calvin. And it will now build on this. But so in appeasement theism, actually, I think this I'll give you now as an assignment. In appeasement theism, what is the explanation for why evil and suffering exists? And then in deterministic theism, what is the explanation for why evil and suffering exists? Right? Those two questions. So just try and think about it, write it, and then give an example for each. So so sorry, someone started me here. So in benevolent theism, I'll go deeper into this. In benevolent theism, the belief is that evil and suffering result from the misuse of free will, not by God causing it. And so remember, let me just explain this one thought, and then this will be the last thing I think I'll be explaining. Yeah, last thing I'll be explaining. The question that all these people are struggling with is, does God's will always happen on earth? Now, how many of you believe that everything that God wants is what happens on earth? If you do that, just react with a thumbs up. You believe that whatever God wants happens on earth. Okay, that's a good number of votes. High. How many of you believe that things can happen on earth that God does not want? Like God is like, I don't want that to happen, and then it still happens. And people have voted for both. So the people who believe that everything that happens God wants, the people who believe that something happens that God does not want. Okay. Let me explain this. My time is up. Let me explain this and then it close. So the question is, does God's will always happen on earth? I think if that is clear, then you'll be able to understand this benevolent theism. Does God's will always happen on earth? Listen to this text. This is Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. Matthew 23, verse 37. I will read 3 verses. Now, Christ is speaking to Jerusalem, and he says this. Let me just read these verses and I'll pick Sharon's question. Christ cries and says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stone them which are sent unto you. How often would I," that is God speaking, "would I have gathered your children together, even as a hen gathers her chicken under her wings, and you would not." Would I is the purpose of will. You willed it not. What is Christ saying? God had a will to gather the Jews, but the Jews had a different will to not be gathered, and the Jews' will is the one that won the day. But take this one for example, 2 Peter 3 verse 9. 2 Peter 3 verse 9. I can just read them, I'll read them. Because my time is up, so I'm just trying to rush this. "The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But will some people perish? Yes, which means his will is not always followed." And that is why we pray this prayer in the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6 verse 10. 6 verse 10. "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." What's the implication? That God's will is always done in heaven in its entirety, but not on earth. On earth, he enlists us to bring his will to pass on earth. And so, in benevolent theism, there is the view that because God is love, love necessitates freedom. Like love cannot force. And because love necessitates freedom, we have true free will. And we can do whatever we want with our free will. And that thing that we do can be good or bad. But every time we do something bad, it causes pain. Every time we do something good, it reduces pain and increases love. So that all pain and suffering exists on earth, not because of God's will, but because of the rejection of His will by our exercise of free will. God is a loving being who allows us to do as we would wish, and only out of mercy intervenes to limit us for our sake or for the sake of others. If that is clear, just say amen. And then I'll stop at this because this is where the next speaker will pick from.
Amen.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So as we close, you see, the conflict here is very simple. Whether it's anger, appeasement, wrath, whatever, on one side we believe that, and this is what Asheri was saying, two views about God. Either God is primarily about power or God is primarily about love. Either the world revolves around him or God allows the world to revolve around us. And this conflict shapes how we view faith, how we view God, and how we view human action. So the next, either the next session on Thursday or Friday, we'll be looking at love versus power. But what I want us to know is that love is the universal longing of the human heart, in spite of what different religions might say. And God is love is the answer to that longing. Sharon has a question. I'll pick that up and then we close. Sorry, guys, I've gone 10 minutes over time.
Hello.
Hello.
It's not a question at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I'm just wondering how profound this message is. I think I will need a whole moment to sit down and reflect on it, because it gives a different perspective of God, and that means so many commonplace things or commonplace phrases that we use are ideally wrong. But
I love
it's
it.
so profound. It's so profound when we are able to understand, when we come down to the point where we are quoting the Lord's Prayer and are saying, "Let thy will be done." I mean, in as much as God is powerful and omnipotent, yes, he has not exercised that power to rule over us with an iron fist. I don't know. I just need a whole moment to think again.
Amen. I love how it is dawning on you. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm glad, Sharon. Beautiful. Mikhail, your hand is also up.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Voice. Wonderful, wonderful session about worldviews. I just have an announcement. Those who haven't yet submitted their week one assignments, please try to finish it by submit it by the end. And also give the names that you registered with when you join the meeting, so that you can help us with tracking our attendance. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a blessed rest of the week. See you on Thursday. Back to you, boys.
Thanks, Mikhail. So our assignment today is simple. Based on understanding of today's class, how do people who believe in appeasement theism, and how do people believe in not benevolent? Why does this word escape me? Deterministic theism. How do they explain why pain and suffering is caused? And for each of them, give an example of how we normally, when you explain pain and suffering, actually fall into this trap. So I gave an example. For instance, something bad happens to you and you're drawn to God and you're like, oh, God is punishing me. That is appeasement theism. Right? So, or someone dies and you say, God loved you more, or it was his time to die. So how do people who subscribe to this view of God understand the cause of pain and suffering and give an example for each of how we normally also fall into the same trap? Is the assignment clear? Anyone is not clear on the assignment? Yeah, I'll type that in the group chat. I will. Awesome. So, guys, thank you so much for your attendance today and your active participation. Really looking forward to meeting with you again on Thursday. As Kevin will be taking us to another class and eventually on Vespers. May the Lord bless you and keep you till we meet again. And above all, may these lessons lead us to have a clearer view of God, a more beautiful view of God, and a deeper faith in God. Allow me to pray. Oh Lord, you are chiefly love, and we thank you for that. Thank you for how you have revealed yourself to us. I pray that you might make us to fully believe that you are love, and that your love gives us freedom to choose, and that you delight, desire, and plead that we may choose according to the principles of love, and not the principles of self or the principles of power. Father, may these lessons find acceptance in our hearts and transform our view of you. May they grow us, shape us. May they transform us, Lord. As we continue this class, by the time we get to module 10, may we bear the witness of Job that we had only but heard of you by the hearing of our ear, but now our eyes have seen you. May this be our experience now and forevermore. This is my prayer of faith in Jesus' name.